Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing my January wrap-up. I read a whopping 5 books in January, and surprisingly enough, only one of them was physical. Normally, I just read primarily physically, but I actually read 3 ebooks and 1 audio. One that was like half audiobook, half ebook, but I'll get to that. Anyway, so I didn't have a very great reading month. Everything I read was no more than 4 stars, but February I have higher hopes for. January, like I said, I read 5 books. The first one being Into the Storm by Melanie Moreland. This one I started out reading as an ebook and then discovered that, duh, my Hoopla has this on audio. There is a vlog, I think. I don't know if I finish it in the vlog or not, but there is a vlog of me reading. There are 2 vlogs, I think, of me reading it. So there's probably more in-depth thoughts in that vlog. It's been a little while. I'm really bad at, when I do wrap-ups, this is why I kind of didn't like doing wrap-ups in the past, is because I don't always remember everything, that the thoughts I have as I'm reading them later on when I'm trying to remember it after I've read several other books. But anyway, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It started out really promising. We have our main character who is running from an abusive husband and is in the middle of a blizzard and crashes in our hero's driveway. And now our hero, again, don't remember names, but our hero is like a reclusive writer, and he is I want to say like agoraphobic, I think, is he's like afraid of like going out. He takes her in. She wakes up with no memory of who she is, and then they spend a lot of, I think it's like 3 weeks, or they spend quite a bit of time together, developing a physical relationship first, and then I think he discovers who she is first, because he has his like person research her or something. I can't remember exactly how it goes down. She doesn't gain her memory back until she's returned back to her husband, and then realizes all of the abuse that she went through with him. And it's just, and like after that point, once she returns home, the story kind of takes like a turn, and that was kind of like where it threw me a little bit. I mean, the beginning was good, but then I was a little bit worried about, okay, well, they're gonna be stuck in his cabin because it's a blizzard and they have no way of leaving. And I'm like, so what could actually happen when there's like so much more book left? But then that all happens, and there's just like, but yeah, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. There's a lot of promise there. Like, I feel like it could have gone a lot better than it did. So that was the first book I read actually I carried over from the end of December into January. Next, I started the Runaway series by Devney. So the first one I read was Runaway Road. This one I gave 4 stars. So I was reading the acknowledgments, or the author's note at the end of the book, and it was saying, Devney was saying that one of her favorite book series as a kid was the Boxcar Children, and she was curious about what would happen to them like as adults, like where were they after their time living in the boxcar. So she pretty much took that, made it a group of junkyard kids that lived in a junkyard. They came from different backgrounds, mostly abusive homes and stuff like that, came together, live in this junkyard, and then dispersed. And this is like, 10 plus years later, where are they now sort of situation. So each of the kids in the junkyard gets their own book. Each of the girls get their own book. So the first one is they go to Boston. She marries into money. And it's pretty much like, I guess, just living day to day. She kind of is like dead inside. Like, she just kind of is there living off her husband's money. And she gets their old Cadillac restored that she was living in with one of the, I think Carson was his name, the main kid at the junkyard who like kind of brought them all in. He was the first one there. And decides to take it back cross country. They all start in California. I'm like so butchering this, but I'm sorry. So they started out in California. She ends up in Boston, gets the Cadillac shipped from the junkyard in California to Boston, has it restored, and then wants to drive it cross country back to California to give to Carson, because she thinks it's as much his car as it is hers, maybe even more so. So she starts on this road trip and ends up in the small town in West Virginia, and meets, the car breaks down. I think she pops a tire. Something happens. She breaks down on the side of the road, and we meet our mechanic who brings her in. And then through a series of unfortunate events, the car is constantly breaking down. Someone's purposely sabotaging it and destroying it. So it's constantly under repair. So she's stuck there longer and longer and develops a relationship with the mechanic. They fall in love, and then it's kind of like, well, this is always a temporary thing because I have to go to California. Like, I don't plan on staying here. I don't plan on coming back. Naturally, things shift course and she decides to stay after all. I did enjoy this because I like the romantic suspense element to it. There is a suspense element with who is just sabotaging her car. He has an ex that has a reputation for sabotaging his future relationships after that, so they think it's her doing it. And just, I liked that aspect of it. I just thought it was a little bit rushed at the end. I thought her decision to stay was a little bit too quick and easy. But I believe this was Devney Perry's first, I don't know if it was her first book, but it was like her first series, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a really good start to a series, a really cool concept, because now that she's in West Virginia, we have her friend Gemma, who also went to Boston with her, visit, and she gives the car to Gemma to take it to Montana next. So it's kind of like a relay with this Cadillac. They're going to pass it around to each person throughout the series, and it's going to end up in California where it was meant to be. So I really liked that aspect of it, this series-wide journey. So Gemma, we have, wants to reconnect with an old friend in Montana, so she takes off, and then that's where that book ends. And again, I gave it 4 stars. So the next book I read after that was Sapphire Scars by Nicole Fox. Now, you'll know I read another book by Nicole Fox last year called Immaculate Deception, which I wasn't a fan of. I think I gave that 2 or 3 stars. It was really good in the beginning, and then it kind of completely fell apart for me. So I was very hesitant to do another Nicole Fox, but just the concepts that she has with her stories and her plot lines have me interested. So like with when I read Immaculate Deception, Sapphire Scars drew me in from the beginning. I just wanted to keep reading, and I read a big chunk of it in one sitting. Now this one was a better, in my opinion. I think this was one of her newer ones. I did end up giving this one 4 stars. It's another Bratva one, but we have our heroine who is dating the hero's brother, and then the brother ends up dying right before she finds out she's pregnant. And there's this whole thing, this whole like secret that the hero is hiding from her, and he ends up taking her in because he wants to protect the child, essentially, because now this child is like the heir to their Bratva, and people are thinking that the child is his and is like, that's his heir. So now he's kind of like laying claim to his position as the next capo, I guess is what you would call them. Again, a little bit of a convoluted explanation. I'm sorry for that. But this one was a lot more promising. It's another duet. I do want to actually read the second half of this book. Unlike when I read the last one, I had no interest in reading on. This one I do want to read on, because there are a lot more interesting elements to it. And then after that, I went right into book 2 of the Runaway series with Wild Highway, again by Devney Perry. This one, we go with Gemma, her journey to Montana to visit their friend Catherine, who they kind of left on bad terms. Catherine and Gemma stayed in Montana at this ranch resort place for a few years working together, and then Gemma got an offer from a real estate agent to start working with them in Boston, and from there on Gemma took her and made it like an empire for herself, and she's like a millionaire. And on a whim, she's not happy with her wealth. She decides to sell her entire company and take off. So she takes the Cadillac to Montana, ends up back at the ranch where her friend Catherine is pretty much running the things now. It's a big family that owns it, a big family ranch. And then she rekindles a relationship with Easton, who they, again, did not leave on good terms because Gemma kind of left without saying anything. She just up and disappeared one day, deciding that it was time to go, and left with no explanation. And of course there's hurt feelings there with Easton, and she has to kind of smooth things over with him. Of course she does, but it's, again, it's another like, okay, well, this isn't gonna last because I have to take the car to California. I think, or she decides to go to Oregon next instead because their friend, was it Aria? I forget who. Someone goes to Oregon. I don't remember. I think she did intend to go to California, and then Catherine is the next leg of this journey because Catherine has a thing for one of the, I think it's Easton's brother Cash. They're best friends. They've been best friends. He's kind of a playboy, and I apparently only ever sees her as a friend, and she wants to be more, and just, he brings a girl around. She can't handle it. She needs to cool off and get away for a little while. So they say, why don't you take the car to Oregon to visit? I think Aria is the next person that they go to visit in Oregon. And she's like, okay. So that's pretty much where that whole thing ends. Of course, Gemma and Easton reconnect. Things get better. She decides to stay. He buys another plot of land to start like a horse breeding business. And she's starting to kind of run that. And it's very small town vibes. This one I only gave 3 stars because it was lacking. There was no like suspense element to it. Nothing that was, I mean, it was an interesting story. I enjoyed the relationship and the romance between the two characters, but I just wanted something a little bit more engaging than what it was. So that one, again, was 3 stars. And then the final book that I read in January, and the only physical book I read, was The Perfect Place to Die by Bryce Moore. This is a young adult thriller horror based around the H.H. Holmes murder castle and the 1890s Chicago World's Fair. Pretty much everyone knows about H.H. Holmes and the murder castle and the World's Fair around this era. So we have our heroine, who is Zaretta. They're both of them, her and her sister, are from a Mormon family in Utah with a very, very abusive father. So they decide to run away together, but in the last minute, Zaretta says, no, I don't want to leave. Her sister, I think Ruby was her name, decides to head out on her own, ends up in Chicago. They have letters back and forth and Ruby says she met a guy, she fell in love, she's going to get married, and all of a sudden the letters stop. And Zaretta knows something bad happened. So she, with the help of, I don't know if it was a neighbor or the pastor of their church, gives her money to travel to Chicago, where she tries to get help with the police and the Pinkerton agency, and the police kind of brush her off, like, because of the fair, everyone's disappearing. It's a hotbed for criminal activity, like, and people are disappearing, like, it's just, this is the perfect opportunity for people to up and leave. So they say they don't take her seriously. And then a young Pinkerton agent is like, well, I can help you. And he does his best to help her, but without, hard evidence or reason to go looking for her or any leads or anything. He's like, well, we don't have much to go on, so you need to find some hard evidence so I can get my uncle involved. So she ends up going around from hotel to hotel. She knows her sister who's worked as a maid at a hotel, doesn't know which one. So she meets a friend along the way who's also a maid at a hotel, who helps her kind of narrow down and map out the city and where these hotels are. Eventually, she lands herself at the place they call the castle. I forget what the actual name of the hotel is, but she gets a job at the castle. And then you start meeting all these different players. You meet Henry Holmes, who is H.H. Holmes, the person who helps run the place, Petizel, I think is what his name is. And you start to learn that the people are disappearing. There are maps in here when she goes and visits the different floors. Like, you're not allowed to visit. The floor you're working on is the floor you're supposed to stay on. Like, you can't, she starts as the first floor and you can't venture up any further. But she does sneak around a little bit, gets kind of a map, and realizes that there's like missing space. Like, there's a room here that doesn't match with the wall, the length of the wall, that kind of things. And she's starting to figure out, piece together, like, weird things are happening. She starts hearing people crying for help and just gets this eerie feeling. I ended up giving this 3 stars. So for me, the most engaging thing, I wanted to keep reading. The most engaging thing about this was the historical value of it. Bryce Moore is a librarian who also wrote, this was his, I think, first book. I don't know, it's the first one I know of. he wrote a book after this that's based on the New Orleans axe murderer, which I also want, or hatchet murderer. Hatchet murderer? I can't remember that famous murderer in New Orleans. So I'm curious to read that one as well, just because I like stuff based on real events and the historical accuracy of things. Now, the beginning of each chapter was also interesting because it has these little like journal entries, which are actually excerpts from H.H. Holmes' confessions that he wrote before he was hanged. So that's what made it really interesting to read. He definitely made it as historically accurate as possible. He even mentions in the acknowledgments that he did base the layout of the castle on what was known at the time, because of course the castle has since been torn down, and I think the post office is in its place now or something like that. Like, it's been years, it's been gone. So I do appreciate that aspect of it. However, I just feel like the Zaretta as a character, she was very kind of like, I guess I want to say basic. Like, there was no really connection to her for me. I was just kind of like following her along on this journey. I didn't really feel for her or anything like that. So she was very dry, I guess I would say, and boring. And just, it was just a girl walking around looking for her sister in like a murder mystery. There were also, I know this isn't a thing to nitpick about, it happens, but there were quite a few typos in this that I saw. Like, there was one where it was like something night and it was like supposed to be N-I-G-H-T and it was K-N-I-G-H-T, and I'm like, that's not the right word. Normally it's like something that you can bypass. Like, typos, they happen, whatever, I understand that. It's just, it was missed. But there was a couple in here that took me out of the story because I was just staring at, I'm like, that's not the right word for that, or why is that spelled wrong? I know it's stupid things to nitpick about, but it was just something that, again, pulled me out of the story. So again, 3 stars. I am still curious though. I do want to read his other book about the hatchet murderer or whatever it was. But yeah, so those were the 5 books that I read in January. Again, not a fantastic reading month, but I still have hopes for February, and it's only the beginning of the year. So yeah, that's it. I guess I'll see you guys at the end of February. Let me know how my reading went for that month, and I guess I'll see you guys in my next one then. Bye.